friends, welcome back to my channel. Today is an exciting day because November has ended. We're now officially in December. I did not read 30 books in 30 days. I read 20 books in 30 days, which I'm really pleased about. But I'm going to keep working on my 30 book goal and I'm going to see how long it takes me. I have some books on the go, and if I can finish some of those books in the next few days, maybe 30 in 35 or 30 in 34. It's just as catchy, right? 30 in 30 is just as catchy as 30 in 34 or 30 in 35. So can I finish 10 books in the next few days is what we're going to try to do, so we can still see if we can salvage this goal. It's just not possible. It's not possible for me at this point to read 30 books in 30 days given the sizes of the books that I read this month. So yeah, it's fine. I'm fine with it. I hope you are too. I hope you're not so disappointed. Like, I hope you weren't so invested in my 30 and 30 goal that you're like really bummed out. I don't think you were. And clearly I wasn't either, because for me it's a number goal. Yes, I want to see if I can do it. I'm still trying to do it at some point, and trying to salvage this part of the goal anyway. But I think the more important thing is that I'm enjoying the things that I'm reading, and almost all the books that I read in November were fantastic. Some of them a lot more than others, but most of them were like really good reads. So I'll tell you about them briefly. I finished, let me see, where am I starting? Oh, okay. So a couple of the books I don't have anymore because they were library loans and I returned them to the library. So the first three books that I finished in November, I already brought them back to the library. The first was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis, beginning of the Narnia series, and I love that book. I love that there's a little bit of a biblical parallel storyline, and we're reading about these children who enter this magical place, and it's a little bit about how going to that place, how the secret changes them. And well, maybe it doesn't change them, it reveals a little bit more of who they are. So kids who were one way in real life are exhibit very similar tendencies in Narnia, even though they're magical elements operating alongside everything else. And so I love the whimsical nature of that book. So I'm gonna be reading more of the series, and I got the second book. No, I got another one of the books in the series from the library, but I think it's the prequel, so I'm not going to read that. I'm going to read them in the way they were published. So I may return that one to the library unread, The Magician's Nephew. I may return that unread so I can read the next published book in that series. And I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, which I loved. It's a short book, and it is about a girl and her family, the house that they inhabit and their neighbors, and the experience of living in this house and living in this community of Mango Street, but also wanting more for their lives. So even though Mango Street is their current identity, their current physical place where they are, in their dreams they see themselves elsewhere. Especially for this girl, she sees herself getting out, getting away from Mango Street. But as she tells the story of the people that are there, you realize how much they're informing her identity, how much they're helping her develop her sense of self. Even as she sees herself leaving, you know that this is part of her formative years. And so I love the exploration of community and how we move inside of it. There's a lot of just really beautiful vignettes and snippets of life and descriptions of people that were just magnificent to read. So love that. And then I read Claire Keegan's book, Small Things Like These, which felt a little bit short. It is a short book. It's called Small Things Like These. And in this one, the book is set around Christmas time, around December. And it has a little bit of a gift of the Magi feel, where this man is the main character, and it's a little bit about the relationship that he has with his wife and the people in his community, but also how he goes out on a work on a work trip. He goes to visit this it's not a convent so much, but it seems like it's a home, it's a religious home, and they've taken in young girls, I guess, who can't live at home for one reason or another. And he finds out that there's abuse happening here, and it's about whether or not he will keep silent and protect his livelihood, protect, because the people that he would speak against by exposing what's happening in the home, in the religious home, speaking out against that would influence his business in a negative way. And he's living in a harsh economy. It's around Christmas time. He needs money to provide for his family, to buy gifts, that kind of thing. But it's about the gift that you could give to the world by just using your voice and using your influence. So it's a little bit of, what do you sacrifice in order to give someone else a gift? And would they do the same for you, that kind of thing? So yeah, love that book for what it touched on, but I also wanted more from it. So yeah, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Those are the first 3 books that I read. Returned those books to the library already. So the first physical book that I can show you is Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Patton, which was a gift from Patrice Jones, and we buddy read it. Patrice, this was a fantastic read, and thank you again for helping me cross off another book from my TBR for 2022. This was delightful. It is set in South Africa. We're reading about 2 men, a black man and a white man, and how their lives intersect because of a horrible thing that has happened between their families. And it shows the humanity that these 2 men are able to show for each other across race lines, and despite the segregation of apartheid, and also the race class divide, which is part of that, but not only. And it shows how even when someone is hurting, when someone has gone through a really painful time, that they can still emerge better. That sometimes the changes that come about because of terrible things could also propagate, could also set in motion things that would be positive. So I love this book. I think I was going to I'm definitely going to make a review video, but I should have made it already, is what I'm thinking. But I read that book and I loved it, and it's like 6 stars out of 5. And then I read Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak, which is a picture book. And it is about a child who thinks that these creatures are strange. And then he meets the creatures and he realizes that usually what we think about other people, it may be mirrored by how they see us. So love the message in that book a little bit. But I also found out that this is a banned book. I'm not sure why. I may have to reread it because I didn't see ban-worthy material in here. I mean, the monsters look kind of scary, but look at this kid. Like, he's supposed to be the unscary one, and he's dressed up like I don't know, is that a ghost? My daughter likes saying the word ghost. Oh, I'm so scared of ghosts. I don't know where she gets these things from. Videos, school, who knows? But yeah, he's scary, right? So yeah. But I love that, and it's one of those books that you just gotta read. Then I read Probably Ruby by Lisa Bird Wilson, and this is set in Canada. The main character here, it's a novel. The main character here is a Native American woman. Well, she's part Native. She's mixed blood, Métis Cree woman, and as a child, as a baby, she was adopted by a white family. And it's a little bit about how she grew up, but also how she seeks to connect with the Native relatives that she doesn't know, and how she seeks to find them, and how she craves this intimacy, this connection, how she explores that in other parts of her life. So there's a lot about this book that very sexualized, but as cringeworthy as that might be for some people, some readers, as you read more into the story, you understand why. So sometimes, people may do things that may seem initially just too much. but you have to seek to understand. You have to want to understand people's whys, people's motives. And so when you read this character Ruby, the when you first meet Ruby, yeah, her life is spinning out of control. Yep. And then you realize. And so I like how the book explores her life and seeks to understand the people around her. There's a lot of kind of vignette writing. So we're reading about the people who would have been in her life if she had met them. Like her, we see her mother and her father making the decisions that will change the course of her life. And we're able to explore their whys and their motives. So yeah, a lot about understanding, I think, is what I would say that book is. So I love that. Thank you, Penguin Random House, for sending me that copy. And then I got a copy of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck from the library. And just as I was about to read it, I passed by the little free library. There's in my community, there's a little free library that's actually at the police station, at the police precinct. And one day I was walking by the precinct, and the lady who manages, I guess, the box, she had brought the box outside on a table, and I was like, really, where was this? Because I've been looking for it. I saw it on the map that this is supposed to be here, but I couldn't find it. She said, yeah, it's inside the precinct. So I said, all right, now that I know, I have some books that I want to drop off. She said, okay, so take a book. And I was like, no, I can't take any more books. But then I saw this, and it was the same edition as the one that I just got from the library, except this would be mine. And so there's a little sticker. They were trying to sell this for $10, I guess. I don't know. 10. No. This is a number. I don't think this is a price. This is a number. And there's someone's email address on the sticker. I may just email them and let them know the book. Your book has found its way to me. So yeah, I read this copy from the Little Free Library. Now it's mine, and it's short. It's 105 or so pages, and it's set in California. We're reading about migrant workers who, by the nature of their lives, they leave one place and they go somewhere else, and that allows them to sometimes leave behind their experiences, leave behind their reputation, except that sometimes you can't leave that stuff behind, because our experiences inform who we are in the future, as well as a reputation is usually manifestation of who we are. So in this one, we see these two men, and one is a little bit mentally challenged, and the other seems to be his protector. And we see what happens when they go to this farm, and they, as much as they want to pretend that they weren't those people in the past, they continue to do what they do, and it has disastrous consequences. And the writing in this is just so rich, so descriptive. For such a short book, it packs a wallop. And the ending, I don't know if you see the ending coming, but when it does, it's shocking, but also you're like, yeah, now I realize that I saw it coming. Man, that book is hard. I may want to reread it. I may reread that in the future, because it's such a short book. You should, right? And then I'm holding up The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka and others, The Metamorphosis and Other Stories, but I only read The Metamorphosis because that story was just enough Kafka for me for one month. So in The Metamorphosis, we read about a man, young man, staying with his parents because he's working. It seems like he's moved out, and he's back staying with them for some period because he's working. He's back in the town working, and he's a salesman of some sort. And he goes to bed one night, and he wakes up the next morning, and he's different. He has been transformed into this insect, this big bug, and he can still hear and understand everything that is happening around him, but he can no longer communicate. So the book is told from his perspective. The story is written through his narration about what he sees and what he hears and what he wants to do but is no longer able to do because of his new state or status. And so I'm not sure exactly what the motivation behind this story is, but I can see parallels in so many places or so many parts of our lives. Like when we lose the ability to express to other people what we need from them and how they treat us, what people would do when they know that no one can I guess what people do when no one's able to take account. This is a tough book. It's a tough story, but I feel like it's one that you need to read. Yeah. So high ratings, I guess is what I'm saying. Then I read Jen Campbell's book, Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores. This is the American version. Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores. The English version, the British English, the British version says Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops. So this American version has inclusions of not just things that have happened to Jen herself as a bookseller, but contributions from other booksellers in the United States and Canada. And so there are lots of just really funny chuckle worthy moments, and there are some things that are kind of strange. You're like, oh, man, I could see this happening to me, and I wonder, if when I have these encounters with people who work in retail, like, do they go home and write down their encounters with me, like, kind of. I wonder, you know, it's this thing that we say. People don't pay as much attention to us as we probably think. This kind of makes me think they do. So you know how sometimes you may have a cringeworthy moment in an exchange with someone. You're like, oh, they're not thinking about me anymore, unless they're writers, and maybe they write it down and they put it in a book. Like, I wonder if any of the people who've read this book have recognized themselves as that customer. As that would be funny. It's anonymous. It's anonymous. Like, there's nothing to reveal a person in this. So yeah, that would be fine. That would be fine, right? But I love it. So Jen Campbell has a YouTube channel. If you're following me, you probably follow Jen, but I don't know. You go look for her. I don't want to link her because I don't know, she might not like what I have to say about the book. Just in case, I don't want to offend. Like, I think that when you post reviews, you are definitely welcome to say what you feel, how you feel about a book. But if you're not, if it's not flattery, if it's not flattery, but if it's not a flowery review, maybe don't link the author. So I won't link the author. But I like this. I like this a lot. I did. I chuckled. I laughed. Just he's talking about it. I'm still laughing. And I'm sorry for my throat, my voice. I'm getting better. I'm getting way, way better. But the voice, I think, is the last thing to really clear up. So I read Into the Wilds by John Krakauer. And I love this. This is one of my favorite books because it talks about adventure seeking and thrill seeking. And it shows what can happen when things don't go well, like this guy Chris McCandless's story. But it also tells you about what happens when people are able to escape from their folly and live to write about it, like this guy John Krakauer. Because what's really interesting is that he tells the story of a young man who goes on this solo hike into Alaska, into the Alaskan wild, and doesn't return. I mean, it's not a spoiler, right? The story is like the synopsis is printed right here. Synopsized, summarized, right here on the front. Like, you don't even have to open the book. Like, there's no hiding it on the back. Like, I would be inclined to not read the back, but it's hard to not read the front. And it says it right here. 4 months later, yeah, anyway. So it's about this young man who is seeking to be at one with nature, and he wants to live with as little external stuff as he can. And so he deliberately abandons or turns down help because he wants to do it on his own. And, for one reason or another, he wasn't able to come back. But John Krakauer, in this book, explores how he himself has done similar things, like especially around the same age range, early 20s, when you're looking to show proof to everyone, including yourself, that, oh, look, I'm an adult, I can do this stuff, I'm strong, I could, man versus elements, man versus wild, I could do this. And he talks about how he almost didn't come back. So it's a little bit of a comparison, a juxtaposition of experiences, the similarities, but also the very, very incredible differences. And it's not just about the author and this subject, but lots of other stories about, how we see nature and how we should live alongside it, but always, live. So then I read The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which is Oscar Wilde's only novel. And I have lots of places in here that I have tabs and notes, because the writing in this is very, very rich. Oscar Wilde's a really great writer. Um, the storyline, not so much. It's about a man who is okay. So this artist sees this guy and he wants to paint him. He's so captivated by how beautiful he is, and he wants to capture it in a portrait. We're living, this is 1800s, so there's no photographs, digital camera and Photoshop. You take a want to preserve the look, you gotta paint it. So he paints this portrait, and it's beautiful. And this young man, at the time when the right about the time when the painting is about to be completed, this masterpiece is about to be completed, another man, an antagonist, comes in and says, "Oh, how gorgeous!" And he changes the moment, he changes the mood, he changes the intent of this picture. And so, the subject of the picture, Dorian Gray, he decides that because this moment is so great, he wants it to last forever. So he doesn't want to age. He wants the painting to age instead. And it's a little bit about um, that experience, the experience of not changing when everything else around you is. It's really interesting, the homoeroticism in this book, where the characters are not specifically they're not specifically gay, but there's a lot of I mean, I don't know so much if it is that they're looking for completeness in other men, these men looking for completeness in other men, or if it's more narcissism, if it's more, how me as my perfect being, how I'm reflected on you, and I'm loving that reflection on you, kind of. So it's homoeroticism stroke narcissism, and it made for a little bit of I don't love that expression here kind of story, but the writing itself, the story itself, was very intriguing. So yeah, read that. We're gonna have to hurry this up. Getting long. Farmer Boy. No, Little House in the Big Woods. I also read Farmer Boy. So let me talk about them together. So I read these two books, even though they're different times. So this is The Little House on the Prairie, book one and book two. Laura Ingalls Wilder. In this one, we're meeting Laura Ingalls as a child. I forget how old she is, she's about 4, 5, 6. Young. She's young. And they're growing up in Wisconsin on the homestead. And in this one, Farmer Boy, we're meeting the 9-year-old boy who will grow up to become her husband, Almanzo Wilder, and he's living in New York State on a farm. And there are a lot of similarities, because there's a lot of, we make our own things, we grow our own food, we process our own food, a lot of descriptions of what life is like on the farm. And when they do go out, the people that they meet and what they do, and there's a lot of wholesome values, a lot of description of what it means to be a man, to be a good man. A good man takes care of his family and pays his bills, and people respect him and that kind of thing. But there's also some violent moments that happen here, where lots of description of how they have to kill animals for food. And I also love, there's a point towards the end where the father explains why they don't have meat today, because he was just touched by the appearances of the animals that he saw. So like he saw a fawn, he saw deer families, and he couldn't shoot them because couldn't break up the family, and so they don't have meat. That kind of thing. This is really, really, really nice, cozy reading. And this one had a description of a child, not a child, a man, a young, like a boy man, comes to school, and oh man, there's the whipping, where someone gets whipped until they bleed. Rough. And of course, in these books, there's descriptions of Indian and native culture, and because these are not native families, it's not always promoting the native culture, but that's fine. I loved it. I love the books. Cozy, like 4-star ratings. Then I read this memoir that the publisher sent me this memoir to read a review, and I loved it. The Deep Limitless Air, Memoir in Pieces by Mary Ellen. And Mary Ellen is she's a writer. She's written other things, and I think she's a writing coach. So I guess she teaches people how to write. But in this one, she examines her life, different anecdotes, different vignettes of her life. And so she shares a little bit about her family and how, as a child, I guess as a young child, her mother had maybe postpartum depression, and she wasn't able to connect with her. And so she lived with someone else down the road, even though her sister lived at home with the family. And the resentment that was bred and continued to permeate their family because of it. So even though someone else was raising her child, the mother refused to acknowledge who these people were. And a little bit about how the distance between Mary Ellen and the mother, even as an adult. That's explored. There's also a lot of discussion of just other people who've come in and out of her lives, men, relationships, marriages, a man who she was engaged to who died, her sister, and there's some kind of weird moments. You're like, when are these things happening? But yeah, because like, you don't see them using the technology that you're using now. Like her sister, the day her sister is dying, like they email each other instead of calling each other on the phone. And her sister was dying from a degenerative disease, so I guess that's why she couldn't speak. But it's also like wow. So there's some really striking moments here. But I mean, even though yeah, The Deep Limitless Air is